I'm excited to hear you.
Same old thing, Jana.
Yeah, but I can never listen because I'm too busy with my ones.
Hello, students. My name is Hector Verdugo. I'm your host tonight. If you're just joining us, I know we're going to keep our room open a little early here, but if you could do me a favor, make sure you find your way to that chat button there. And then when you're chatting, please select your to all panelists and attendees. This way we can see your questions and comments there in the chat. That's how we're going to be interacting with you tonight. We'll go ahead and get started right on time here at 7. But please, if you don't mind, just let us know where you're from in the chat. So make sure you adjust it to all panelists and attendees. From Louisiana, there we go. Thank you for being in Anson, Colorado. Philadelphia here, Indiana, Minnesota. Hey, Ashton. Isabella in Ohio, North Carolina, Vancouver Island. People from all over here. Davian, 22. From Virginia there, Oregon in the house. Hey, Julia, thanks for being here. Mahima in San Francisco. All right. I mean, I know we're going to have a lot more people joining us here shortly, so. Hey, how's Texas, Central Valley, Marina in California, Ethan in Seattle, Elena out there in New York. Thanks for being here late tonight. So if you're just joining us, please feel free to let us know where you're from. Just make sure in the chat button, when you're clicking chat, you adjust to all panelists and attendees. This way I can see all of your chats and I can connect with you guys here in the chat room. Hello, South Carolina, Modesto. Thanks for being here. Right. We're just going to give it another minute. Hey, for those of you just joining us, just make sure that you find your way to the chat button there. We will be interacting with you to take questions. I'm going to be working with you to deliver your questions here to the stars of our show tonight. Just make sure that you're adjusting your chat to all panelists and attendees. So just give it a shot. Let us know where you're from in the chat room if you haven't already. Just to make sure it's working there for you. All right. Thanks for being here. Hey, Zena. Thanks for being here. Alicia in California. Tucson. Hey, George. Juhong. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us from across the world. All right. I think we're ready to get started here. All right, so I'll just give it one more minute here. But anyway, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Hector Verdugo. I'm the Senior Vice President of Admissions at Academy of Art University here in San Francisco, California, USA. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you. We have an all-star cast here tonight. The topic tonight is producing and directing. So plenty of awards in the house tonight to give you great advice on how to get into this industry, how to pursue these careers. So before we get started, I wanted to do a couple of things I'm going to point out for anybody that's joined us. Right there in the middle of the screen, you're going to see the chat button. Make sure that when you click the chat button, you're adjusting to all panelists and attendees. I'll be your host tonight. You're going to see me in the chat. I'm going to be answering questions. I'm also going to be sending those questions over to Jana and to Jack. This way that they can interact with you and make sure that we get the most out of tonight. Should be a lot of fun. I do want to take a quick second to let everybody know. So hear me out really quickly if you can. Everybody here will be getting a copy of this event as a recording. It'll be sent to the email that you used to register for this event. Most of the time in the chat, I'll see people ask all throughout, where can I get a copy of this? So just know it's automatically going to be sent to you, so you don't have much to worry about. It's going to be sent your way. Next thing to note is we're constantly doing a ton of different events. So I'm going to put a couple of links here in the page real quick. One of the things I'm going to do is put the link to our event page. If you're interested in checking out some of the events that we do a ton of different free workshops, a ton of different free events. You can click on that link right there and join any of the workshops or events that you see. Next event up on Tuesday evening. As always, we do events on Tuesday evening. Next one is going to be focused more on the graphic design program. So it's called Designers as Creative Problem Solvers, Changing the World, held by Phil Hamlet, the head of our graphic design program. That'll be on same time, same place this Tuesday coming up, the 20th, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Feel free to join us if any of you are out there. Also, at the end of this workshop, I'm going to be dropping some other links on how to apply to the university. I'm going to go ahead and put in my email right now. So anybody here that's interested in looking at the school, whether that be for undergrad, graduate school, international admissions, pre-college, feel free to send me an email and we'll connect. I'll be more than happy to guide you through whatever steps are necessary. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Let me introduce our all-star cast. So first, I'm going to introduce Jack Perez, our lead directing faculty. He will be a big part of the show tonight. He's one of our stars. So a little bit about Jack. He's directed over a dozen feature films. His latest is a World War II adventure comedy being produced by Ben Stiller. His movies include indie hits, Some Guy Who Kills People, produced by John Landis, La Cucaracha, winner for the Best Picture Austin Film Festival, and The Big Empty, winner of AFI Film Festival for Best New Writer. He is also the writer and director of the modern cult classic Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus, directed Wild Things 2 for Sony Columbia, and directed Monster Island for MTV. He's also the director, creator of the hit Adult Swim video game, Polar Bear Payback. His television directing credits include the pilot for Xena Warrior Princess, episodes of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, the hit reality series Temptation Island, and Last Comic Standing, and the made-for-television movies Unauthorized, Brady Bunch, The Final Days of Mary Kay, Lattimore Story. A member of DGA and WGA, he is the recipient of awards for both writing and directing, and has received a critical praise from Robert Ebert, Harry Knowles, and Ain't It Cool News, Fangoria Magazine, Film Threat, the LA Weekly, the Austin Chronicle, and the New York Times. Also joining us today is Jana Memel, our Executive Director of the Schools of Entertainment. So a little bit about Jana. She's an Academy Award-winning producer and writer. Jana has produced over 25 movies and over 65 half-hour live-action shorts that have played as television series in more than 30 different countries. The films she has produced have won Writers Guild and Directors Guild Awards, Emmys, Cable ACE Awards, and the Humanities Prize. So without further ado, my name is Hector Verdugo. I'm going to be in the chat here to answer all your questions and help you out. I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Miss Jana Memel, everybody, and I'll see you all in the chat. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Hector.
Hey, folks. So thank you for coming tonight. And I want to give you sort of the lay of the land. So I'm going to spend a few minutes, hopefully very few, but very informative, talking about the schools of entertainment. Then Jack's going to show a little trailer of our summer web series, which we shot totally on green screen, and a couple other things. So you can see how even in COVID, you can direct as if you were there. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about producing the special effects film that Jack is going to direct later in the year. And then Jack is going to take it away with an incredible presentation of all the effects he's working on with the special effects department. So first of all, let's talk about what it's like to study here at the Schools of Entertainment. So the Schools of Entertainment are 3 schools. Already I have sharing problems. Sorry, guys. Here we go. The Schools of Entertainment are 3 schools. There's a School of Acting, the School of Motion Pictures and Television, and the School of Writing for Film, Television, and Digital Media. We all share the same building and we synergistically work together. So right before this, we were talking about who we're going to cast as the lead in this film. And I was mentioning 3 of our more stellar young actors. And that's a really great benefit for both the directors and actors, because we're constantly shooting, and a lot of the stuff we shoot plays in film festivals around the world. So our directors get showcased, and at the same time, our actors get showcased. Now, I want to show you a little film. I'm hoping I optimized correctly. This is what it's like to work here when we're not in COVID.
Pictures up and action.
That was great. Cut.
I think AAU has a lot of great opportunities for filmmakers to explore what they're capable of.
I think the students are really close to the industry, and then they can attach it after they graduate.
Doggy back. Stop here.
Every single professor I've had has been just like a pool of knowledge.
Work with teachers who are professionals in the industry really makes you feel confident and like you can go out there and do it on a real set.
But then we should do 3 colors.
Yeah.
Okay.
The AD never leaves.
Okay, I know.
The AD never leaves.
Like if so that if you bring him forward into this kind of close-up where he notices.
Much more promising.
Not much.
Guys! I don't. Whoa! Guys, where'd you go?
So one of the cool things about studying here is we believe in doing. So in our very first semester, you take a basic filmmaking class, you take a basic editing class, you take a basic writing class, you take a basic producing class. Even if you're a grad or undergrad, from these 9 core classes, you're going to take a lot of them. So you're going to take Cine 1, Sound Design 1, Production Design, Directing, Lighting, Directing some more, and another writing class. Now, the point of this is to give you a buffet, because nobody really knows what they want to do when they go to film school. Everybody, or I'd say the majority of people, show up here thinking they want to direct. But then they start taking these other classes and seeing the magic of a lot of different things. And some people move off from it, and some people learn how directing interfaces with all of these different disciplines. Now, we offer a class called 234 as in the 3rd semester. And in 234, everything gets put together. So what happens in this class, and the formal name is Scene Production Laboratory, is in groups of 3, every student in that group writes, produces, and directs a film. And you work with a crew. So in your 3rd semester, as a director or producer, you're working with a cinematographer, a production designer, a sound person, an editor, and you're shooting work that a fellow student has written. And you go from 234 to declaring your major. Now, when I say shooting, it's because we, unlike most film schools, have 5 working sound stages. Now, these sound stages, we have a scene construction shop, so we can build them as anything. We also have a props shop. We have a wardrobe department. So if you're talking about a studio, you have the advantage of working on flexible sets with grids so that you can light. And even during COVID, we have COVID safety rules that are the same COVID safety rules as Hollywood is using. And come Friday, mask on, I'm going to be standing on one of these stages. So even now, our students are shooting on our stages as well as shooting on green screen with all safety protocols in place. So we, at the end of your journey, whether you're a graduate and undergraduate, and we do offer in MA in writing and directing and MFAs in writing, producing, directing, cinematography, and production design, you take a year-long thesis class called Production Central or Senior Narrative. In this class, you start out by developing a film that you're going to shoot in the 2nd semester if you're a director. If you're a producer, you're going to produce 2 of those films. And if you're a writer, you're going to write those films. And so by the end, and these shorts are 20 to 30 minutes long. They're shot with crews of up to 20 people. So by the end of your experience at AAU, you have shot on the top of the line Alexas and everything else. You've run crews, you've interfaced with professional actors, and you have something to go out and show Hollywood or wherever else you're going to get a job, exactly what you can do. Now, Jack teaches a class called Shot in a Day, which is another experience before the thesis film, where you shoot scenes written by students in 6 hours that are full short films. And in fact, the film we're talking tonight was developed as a Shot in a Day. It's a little bit more ambitious than most of our Shot in the Days, but it was written by a student in a class I teach called Writing for Shot in a Day. And it is going to get made. And I assure you will be in film festivals. Every summer, we do a web series. Jack's going to show you a little bit of what we did this summer. This summer's web series was exceptional because our actors were in 6 different places. In fact, some of our actors were in different states. Our directors were on Zoom, and through using an app called Filmic Pro, we're able to use iPhone 11s as 4K cameras and see what was going on. Our directors were in 11 different places, and you'll be able to judge soon because the web series is almost done with editorial. We have 256 green screen shots in it. So those are very quickly getting pulled together, but it looks like people are in a room together. We have scenes with 5 people in a room together. So we've adapted to COVID in an amazing way. We also teach VR and we teach drones. We're even, again, teaching drones by sending drones to students, even now during COVID, so that they can get that experience. We have a class called Production Hub, open to all grads and undergrads. Production Hub takes clients from the outside community. So our students have won commercial awards. We've done PSAs for the San Francisco Fire Department, the Coast Guard, the Forest Service that are on national television and are on the web all over the world. And we'll take any, and we've done commercials for Silicon Valley companies. So you, again, as a student director, are already building a professional reel. Now, with all this shooting, we need volunteers. So no matter which of the schools of entertainment you're in, from the very first day you get here, you can work on a film set. In fact, we will carry you to the set because we need volunteers. And we do work with crews when you were not in COVID of up to 20 people. And so you're getting hands-on practical skills. And many of our students now are going out and getting real world jobs. Now, our School of Acting is Meisner-based. And although we do teach many, many different methodologies of acting, very many different schools, what sets us apart from other schools of acting is an emphasis on working for camera. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have plays. Last semester, not summer, but spring, in COVID, we did 9 play productions. And we found a way through Zoom to do 9 plays. We also did 1-person shows and other festivals. Now, the thing about our camera work, though, is that students starting in the 2nd semester go in front of camera. Because let's face it, the real money jobs, whether you're working in commercials, industrials, reality TV, movies or TV, is not in plays, it's in front of a camera. So when you leave AAU, you have a professional reel because we bring, for students in the 3rd, 4th, and I'm sorry, from the 4th, 5th, and 6th semesters, sometimes the 7th and 8th, we bring directors from Hollywood up to direct our students in scenes. So A, they get that professional director directing them, but also they get a professional reel. So when our students leave here, they worked in front of camera, they know what camera's like, and they have a professional reel to show for it. Also in our acting department, of course, we have stage combat, we have voice and speech, we have movement, we have all the things that make for a great acting department. We have a strong improv program. We also have improv club, which pulls from the whole university, which performs all over the place. So our acting program is quite robust. And finally, in our School of Writing, we teach both television and feature writing. And of course, television is basically streaming nowadays. So we equip writers to work in any one of those media. And the really, really cool thing about writing here at AAU, just like the script we're going to talk about tonight, is many, many, many of the things you write get produced, get on film. So you're not waiting for that opportunity when you get out of school. You've got that opportunity right now. Another thing about AAU is our wonderful faculty, because just as Jack works, I work. I write professionally I get commissioned all the time by studios to write. Jack is writing. One of our instructors took off last semester because she produced the Comey show that's on Showtime right now. So we have instructors who not only are talking about the good old days, but are living the present day. And that is an enormous value to students. So now we're going to show you what directing looks like in COVID. Jack. Okay, here we go. So this is what we did this summer, utilizing green screen technology. People together who weren't.
Taking the collaborative project class this semester was a very rewarding experience, and I think it's because it was so ambitious of a project.
This was something that, I've never done before. The other thing was it was the summer semester, and it's a shorter semester, so to be able to pull off a web series in a summer semester virtually, I didn't think it was possible.
This is take 2, marker.
I was wondering, how are we going to create a professional drama with actors and crew isolated and separated from one another?
Set.
Psychologically, when you sit here and you wonder if these things are possible, when you think about them, and if you haven't done them before, it's just a thought.
One thing that I did not expect to learn in this experience was how to use green screens. So this is actually something I never thought I would get the opportunity to do in film school. So I really did consider that a major value added to my learning experience in this class. From a creative perspective, I felt that telling the story in that aspect was really the same as it would be in any other set in terms of script analysis, rehearsing with actors, working with production. I mean, every decision was, really to help inform the story.
Whoa, seriously, we talked about 10,000.
Even though this was virtual, we were crew. This was a professional set. There were times I was watching the scene and I forgot that that actor wasn't even there in the physical space we had to put them there. So that said a lot, being a crew member there, and I actually forgot because I was so much into the story.
For Marissa, this is plate 1.
I do think the final product surprised me in a very positive way. I was quite pleased with our rough cuts, and as a director, that's always a very good thing.
Particularly with the green screen and the compositing. Being able to do that, it's basically expanded me as a filmmaker, being able to do certain things that before the summer semester would have been in theory that I could do it, but now I can honestly say this is something that I accomplished. This is something that is possible. It can be done. You can virtually direct a movie, direct a web series, direct a film. You can, have crew in separate places, and you can perform as if you were on set. Even though we weren't physically there, we were virtually there on time as crew, trusting one another, looking out for one another. It was a very good experience.
So there you have that.
Are we doing a piece of Betty's or no?
Yeah, we can if you want. What we can do is show you a little bit of a thesis film that was done in the same exact manner, where not, these two actors were completely separated, but you're still able to have physical interaction. In this case, it's an abusive relationship, and the man attacks the woman, and you'll see that it looks like he's attacking her, but he was never there. He was on green screen.
It's always been about what I do for you, Peter.
What you do for me? Did you just say what you do for me? You don't do shit for me. You don't do anything for me.
Okay, well, if I do nothing, then, you'll be fine without me, won't you?
So fucking sit the fuck down!
Peter, stop!
I'm fucking talking to you. You like that?
Stop!
In that particular scene, you still have really, amazingly strong performances. That actor, the male actor, was on a green screen in a completely different location, but with blocking and proper eye lines and green screen technology, as you saw in the summer presentation, you're able to composite those people together and create a believable performance. So we're continuing to do that now very successfully.
So 3 of our directing classes this semester, every single class, the director is directing this way so that they have the opportunity to work with real actors. So we have actors around the country. I mean, it's actually helped us because we can cast actors from New York, LA, Chicago. It doesn't matter where the actor is. And so for our students, they're able to work with high quality actors, doing camera angles, different lenses, and still be stuck in the COVID isolation we're in. So let's move to our movie. Let's move to the movie we're going to do. This movie was written in my class last semester. And I kept saying to the writer, not director, I don't know how we're going to make this movie, but he was quite passionate about writing it. So I let him write it. And then it came out so good that I said, we have to make this movie, which is what I am. I'm a producer. I produced my first movie at 30 years old. It was a $60 million movie. It starred Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster. You guys probably don't know who they are, or many of you don't, but it would be the equivalent of George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And sort of, kind of, I'm a producer. And when I see a good piece of material, I got to make it. So we're going to make this movie. So what is a producer? Well, a producer, many people say, is anybody with a telephone. And the reason they say that is because producer is who you know and what you know. Your job, in my opinion, is to make the movie happen. And in my opinion, it's to make the movie happen in support of the director. Some producers have a slightly different point of view of that, but that's my opinion. So you guys see producers everywhere, right? You look at credits, there's 42,000 producers. How do we know? Well, what's an executive producer? Well, I can tell you in television, an executive producer is totally, completely, 100% in charge. They're what's called the showrunner. They probably came up with the idea. They're probably supervising the writing room. They're probably supervising all kinds of physical production. And when you get an Emmy, you get it as the executive producer. Now, in features, it's totally different. The executive producer could be the star's girlfriend or boyfriend. The executive producer can be the person who put in the money in the film. It's a credit that has many, many meanings. In features, the person really in charge often is the producer. And the producer's job is to find the material, find the money, put the film together, stand on this, help in every aspect of pre-production, stand on the set, and again, as I said, try and help the director get their vision in every way they can. Then there's somebody called a line producer, which is a credit you'll never see, which is an incredible tragedy because this person works and works and works. And a line producer is the person in charge of watching the money. The line, when you hear about the line and you hear above the line, Above the line is all the stars, it's all the actors, it's the director, it's the writer. Below the line is the editor, production designer, cinematographer, and everybody else. And the line producer is in charge of all of that. And they manage the money, they manage the schedule, they manage the budget, so that the producer, who oftentimes the line producer reports to, but not always, the producer can help the director get their creative vision. So the line producer is essential to the running of a film from day, or a television show from day to day to day. Then there's a co-producer, and I never know what they do. Oftentimes the writer will get a co-producer credit. Again, people who contribute money to a film, sometimes you'll see a long list of co-producers. You know, the minute you start seeing a long list of co-producers, that those people contributed money to a film. And then there's the associate producer. And the associate producer in television is often the post-production supervisor. In features, the associate producer can often be a junior executive in the production company that's moving up, that's learning how to do things. Associate producer, again, can be a credit given to an agent or a manager. So in television, it's a credit that really has a definition often. In features, it doesn't. So let's say I got Jack's script. And let's take 1 second and describe this script for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to read it. The script stars an ambitious young scientist, PhD woman going for her science degree who's working in a research lab to pay for her going to school in some kind of project about mold. She's got a really awful job and she's looking for a better job in this project. Well, what she comes to discover is that mold has many meanings. And perhaps the project isn't even about mold. And maybe the mold has a mind of its own. It's also about the janitor in the building who may be a cowboy in disguise. So it's all about the mold. Jack, do you have something you want to say about the story that? Okay. So
what I was going to say is basically, if you know it's a blob movie, you know, basically it's the janitor versus the blob ultimately. And that's what I'll maybe you guys don't know the 1958 blob or the 1988 blob, but the blob is what came to mind immediately. And that's when I was like, okay, cool. We're going to make a blob movie, but continue.
Okay. So let's say I read the Blob movie as a producer. And I thought, I'm dying to make this movie, okay? Now there's two ways a script comes to a producer. Well, there's many ways, but two main ways a script comes to a producer. One is with a director attached. Another is with money attached. And the last way is, hey, I read this great script. And each one of those paths takes you in different ways as a producer. But what you're always going to want to do pretty early, especially with a special effects film, is do a shooting schedule and a budget. Now, this is a myth because you can say to the person doing this for you, do me a high budget one and a low budget one. As a rule of thumb, budget follows number of shooting days. So Jack can shoot this movie in 40 days, 30 days, or 5 days. And the way you're going to budget the movie, a lot of it has to do with the number of days. So you're going to do this so you're going to get a sense of maybe what the movie is going to cost. Maybe, kind of, sort of. Now, you have to decide if you're going to go for the money or you're going to go for the talent. And director is also considered talent in this case. And this is one of these things, it's a chicken or egg thing. So nowadays, it's very hard to get money without a director. It's very hard to get a director without money. Jack, how many years is the longest you've spent on a project that you really love but hasn't quite gotten made?
That hasn't gotten made?
Yeah.
4 or 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So go ahead. No, please.
No, I was going to say, I mean, most of the projects that I've done, the real passion projects, got made 4 or 5 years after I was ready to make them. That's my rule. If I'm ready to make it right now, I know it's probably going to happen in about 5 years.
So directors are reluctant to sign on to 9 financed movies because a lot of 4 or 5 years not getting made doesn't pay a mortgage. And financiers are reluctant to give you money unless there's a director because they want to know, what's this film going to be like? So as a producer, you're constantly tap dancing between the two. Because if you did get a director and the money people didn't like the director, then you'd have to figure, how do you get rid of the director? And so it is this dance that a producer has to do. Now, the other thing a producer has to do is figure out, this is the movies I make. This is the movies big studios make. Now we're making the same movie, okay? The script is 100% the same. It's the number of days you're shooting it and the cost of the special effects. So where do you go look for your money? Do you go to a studio? Because when you go to a studio, it's something like this for creative people. Because a studio controls and controls and controls, because 100 million or 200 million is a lot of million. Or you go to a lot of people you know, or a bank or independent financiers. I put up my house for financing for a movie once. And I've made 2 movies on credit cards. And you go to independent financing and you're totally free, but you don't have a lot of money. And that makes you very unfree sometimes in some of the creative choices you can make. Now, Jack and I will tell students all day long, well, you can be more creative because it opens your eyes to the outside. It's nice to make movies with money, not hundreds of million, but money. So you have to figure out, what budget area are you going to be looking for in your film? And then you have to ask yourself, and especially with special effects films, do you need a star? So in today's marketplace, the more packaged your movie is, the more likely you are to get money. In fact, a lot of producers are saying, well, they actually want us to shoot for 3 days before we get money. But special effects movies don't need stars. The star of the special effects movie is always the effects. The Blob is very definitely the star of this movie. But Jack and I have even talked about, well, do we need a name? Is there some role where we can bring somebody in for a day? Because we'll get better publicity, we'll get more press. Now, we're talking about this in like, well, it's the plane ticket to San Francisco, and me as the producer, who can I find? Who can I beg? How do I connive to get somebody in with my phone and my contacts list? Get somebody to read the script? Do I know the hairdresser of a movie star? Well, I once was asked by a director to throw a script to get the maps to a movie star's home, find out where Jack Nicholson lived, and throw a script over his fence. And I swear to God, I was asked to do that. Okay, how do you get a name? And is a name worth it? Because the minute you get a name, your costs start going up. So in special effects movies, is it worth it? Then you have to think, okay, special effects supervisor. Now the special effects supervisor should get a producer credit, because the effects in a movie are what make a movie. And the special effects supervisor is the partner of the director in making this pipeline work. They work hand and glove with the director to make everything work. Jack's been working for what, 4.5 months now on the effects on this movie, and we haven't done a day of shooting. So this is a long-term planning when you do special effects movies. The other thing you need is a great storyboard artist, because in an effects movie, you shoot nothing. And Jack's going to show you some drawings, nothing without storyboards. So that's another job of the producer. Then you need a cinematographer. The lighting in a special effects movie is a big deal. You don't want generally to hire somebody, again, chicken and egg. How do you get to shoot a special effects movie? Because everybody wants somebody who shot a special effects movie. So it's a chicken and egg thing. Production design is a really big thing in a special effects movie. The lab, Jack's going to talk about. What does it look like? What is the cylinder the blob initially lives in going to look like? Okay, all of these things, you're casting these people as, and your job as a producer is to bring choices to the director. And then to sit in the meetings with the director and these people, and the director, well, I really, really like their reel, but I don't really, really like them. Well, if you don't really, really like them, even though you like your work, do you want to live with them? Because all these people I'm talking about, you're together 10, 12, 14 hours a day for 6 months, 5, 6 days a week. And the producer's job is to help the director figure out that chemistry and what trade-offs to make. So the big deal in a special effects movie is the special effects house. Who is going to do your special effects? Who is the artist who's going to paint your images? Now, one of the things you're going to look for is what's the style of the house? What kind of stuff have they done before? It's always about what you've done before. What budget level do they work at? Some special effects houses you're going to go to and you're going to say, I have $5,000, and they're just going to laugh and walk away. And other special effects houses are going to say, wow, you're new, we're new, that's great. Some special effects houses you're going to go and say you have $100,000, and they're going to walk away. Others are going to go, wow, we did 80 last time. Also, are they interested in your script? Do they have an emotional connection to your style? Do they and the director vibe with each other? It's all about people connecting. It's a big job of a producer to make sure that everybody connects and can work together collaboratively. And then when you're looking at a special effects house, how flexible they are. Because you redo effects, you redo them again, and sometimes you redo them again. And how open are they to that redo? Because some effects house will go one time and then you're paying through the nose. Other effects houses are open to that collaborative redo. So you've got to weigh all of these factors in making these decisions. And then finally, you're going to figure out your locations. Are you practical? Do we find some lab that will let us take it over? Now, we do have the blob killing many people. I don't know if a lab would think it would be good to have their name on this movie, because perhaps scientists are a little bit off the reservation. But a practical lab has all the stuff in it. Now, the lighting is really nice, but maybe that's not the lighting Jack likes. So maybe it's not a plus. Or you go to a stage which has nothing, but you can build the world you see. You can control the lighting. But does it cost more to dress your stage than it does to go to the practical lab? And again, these are things the producer is weighing. And they're always weighing what's the best thing for the budget, what's the best thing for the film. And they don't always go together. Mm-hmm. And how do you manage that? So a producer's job, juggling chainsaws, and refereeing between people. And the producer's job is all of these things all the time. So that's a synopsis. Jack, take it away.
Thanks, Jana. Well, you know, you want, or I always want a producer like Jana who knows their stuff. You know, I mean, the best producers I've worked with really have a strong working knowledge of every department in a film production. And that goes for a director too. I mean, directing is not just saying action and cut and being the boss. I mean, directing, a really strong director really understands cinematography, really understands editing, production design, certainly acting, and on and on and on. But I rely upon a producer like Jana to find that balance between what is affordable and what is going to make the best movie. You know, some producers are like, don't spend any money, but then the expression is you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You wind up with a movie that's on budget, but it doesn't look like anything. So it's a very, very tricky job that I don't know how to do. You know, I know how to do the filmmaking part. I rely upon a strong producer like Jana. With this particular script, which is called The Stuff in the Walls, which again refers to, as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's a modern day Blob movie. Mike Peterson in Jana's class wrote a science fiction horror movie that to me, at least initially, is inspired by the Blob. And it came to me through Jana like any movie. You know, sometimes, as Jana was saying earlier, a director will spend years either writing a script, nurturing a script along, trying to put it together to make the movie, and I've done that in the 30 years that I've been directing. Or it'll be the kind of thing where a manager or a producer will read something and go, I think this would be good for this director. And because Jana knows that I have a bit of a past with monster movies and with special effects and a certain sort of black comic sensibility, she was like, well, you know, maybe this isn't crazy. Maybe Jack can do this kind of work. So some people have asked, I guess I can show you something. You know, I've done movies in all genres, but you know, Halloween is coming. This is one of my favorite times of years to watch monster movies. And even though I've done dramas and I've done thrillers and I've done comedies, throughout these last 3 decades, I still keep doing monster movies, which were my favorite, in many ways, as a little kid, my favorite kind of movie. So just to give you a sense that I have a little bit of a background in this world, let me just show you 30 seconds of something, give you an idea of what I've done. Let me make sure this is optimized here. Okay, here we go.
Sir, target is heading for the Golden Gate Bridge. Holy shit!
Okay, so you get a sense of my tastes in monsters. Some of them you may have seen. It's funny because I noticed somebody was named Xena, and I wonder if that was inspired by the show, which was, as was mentioned, was my first directing job, and that had monsters in it. So, you know, I'm disposed to liking these kinds of scripts if they're well written. And Mike's script was. It had great characters, it had great dialogue. So the script came to me, and I read it, and I was like, "Cool, I'd like to do it." And you know, as Jana will tell you, what happens is there's a process where the director needs to sort of mate with the script, particularly if they haven't written it. In other words, there has to be sort of a fusion or a transference or something that happens where the director and the script now come together. And when I was reading Mike's script, you know, what he had done, and maybe this came out of the class, a practical concern was he wasn't really showing a lot of this blob creature, this weaponized, chemically engineered bioweapon blob thing. A lot of that stuff was happening off screen. And, as you can tell from seeing some of these clips, I was like, well, I sort of want to follow the John Carpenter 1982 Thing principle, which is if it's a cool monster, let's show it. Let's find a way to show it. And as it turned out, our special effects animation department at the university here was looking for a project. And so this is the perfect sort of way of solving this problem. Like, let's get the animation school to really deliver high octane special effects for this project. And so what happened is I went to Mike and I said, look, I know you feel like your hands were tied a little bit. Let's write some more visual moments. Let's really personify this blob. One of the things, and let me share some more things with you. It starts really with inspirations, right? So I had mentioned, the things that came to mind immediately, like the 1958 Blob, which was Steve McQueen's first movie, not the Steve McQueen now, but it's the old Steve McQueen, which is basically what it is, a big giant blob that, absorbs people and envelops towns and buildings and so forth. And, when you see it in the 58 Blob, it's pretty much what you would expect. It's like a big bowl of animated jello. And, I think some of you mentioned, I know that movie. Maybe your parents showed it to you. Maybe you've caught it at Halloween. They did another version of it in 1988, and this was coming to mind. Chuck Russell did a version of the film. And it's what was interesting about that movie, because it was made in the 80s and, you could get away with more, is that you could see people really starting to get absorbed into this blob. It wasn't just covered like a blanket. You could see that this thing was dissolving them and incorporating, these people. And I kept thinking, like, maybe we should do more of that. Maybe we should think about these kind of images. Again, what Mike had written was scary, but it was sort of in shadow and it was abstract. And there are some movies, like the great Val Lewton, who made the original Cat People. There are films that play in an abstract, sort of suggestive way, but I don't think a blob movie, if you're gonna go see a blob movie, you wanna see the thing doing its business. And speaking of the thing, that was another idea. I kept thinking of, the Thing with Rob Bottin's special makeup effects. Again, this is a practical special effects movie, no CGI, done in 1982. Groundbreaking, and I just watched it the other night again for the 10 millionth time, and it still is, wonderful in terms of its vision. I kept thinking, maybe we can get away from just this bowl of jello. Maybe we can just get away from the slime and start to have it be something that retains the shape and the texture and the gooey and the sinews and the muscles of the things that it eats, and as we started to go through it, Mike started to write. So, if you look at, for example, his initial script, and I just took a page from it here, you'll see that the extent of the ending of the movie, the big climax, which we're going to talk about today, was here. The ceiling tiles above them give way, and a cascade of oily slime drenches them. And that's basically it. And that's what was written. And it's not that it isn't dramatic, it's just not particularly visually interesting. Or it's certainly something that you've seen before. And my interest in this was, can we do something more? So as the script started to evolve, and I think you guys start to have this PDF, the reason it's blued out is because the special effects department basically goes through and highlights in blue anything they think is going to be in effect and wants to discuss with me, which is, how are we going to do this, Jack? And I'll get to that in a second. But what was once just the oily slime drenches them, then in the next draft that Mike wrote, turns out to be this whole thing, where Jane is pulled into the ceiling tiles, and this Smitty, who is the janitor, tries to grab her flailing legs, and then she's dissolved above the waist, and disembodied legs and tendrils of slime. And what we started to do was just, based on our discussions, he went back and started to write this whole sort of kick-ass finale featuring things like Smitty, who is the janitor, opens fire and becomes a John Woo action hero. So I had kind of given him license. I'd given him license as a writer to say, you know what, forget about the budget just for a minute. You know, this is what turns producers like Jana white. They're like, don't say forget about the budget.
I told you you could.
But I said, forget it. That's true. Thank you. Because not every producer would do that. Everybody was like, don't do that. Just have the slime drip from the ceiling and that's it. Cheap, done. But with Jana's permission, you know, we gave him license to say, you know what, just imagine the coolest thing you can think of. And what happened was he came back with something that was perhaps too big, but it certainly was better than what was there as far as I was concerned as a director. I was like, this is a lot more of my style and what I want to see. Now, how can we do this? So just to take a beat to talk about what directing is a big thing. And as Jana was saying earlier, a lot of people think they want to be directors and then they get into it and they realize, wow, this is a lot of work. And for me, directing is fundamentally about translating the script. That's what it is. It's a translation process. And it's like, it's in many ways, it's like a birthing process. Not that I know anything about childbirth, but if you think about it, the mother, the original mother is the writer. There's nothing there. If you've ever seen Barton Fink, the great Coen Brothers movie, there are these scenes where John Turturro is staring at a blank page. It's like infinity. There's nothing until the writer gives birth to the story and the characters and the dialogue, right? But then there's this next critical step, which how do you turn that piece of paper, that stack of paper, into pictorial language, into visual language? Because after all, film is ultimately shots cut together. And it's no difference, there's very little difference between sentence structure, where words are put together, and shot structure, where pictures are put together. It's still a linear progression, just like writing music. You know, one note follows the next note and so forth. So when I read a script, it's now my job, at least in the beginning, to translate all of these words into shots. They have to be shots that are committed to, and particularly for a special effects movie, you can't just say, we'll figure it out on set. As Jana was saying earlier, storyboards are critical because you have a lot of technicians that have to know exactly what the director has in mind so that the effect can be executed, so that the live action part of it can be done properly, so it meshes with the effects component, whether it's practical or whether it's CGI. These worlds have to intersect. Everybody has to be following the same blueprint. So as I said, Mike had written this slam bang thing. Some of it was very, in the new draft, some of it was very specific, some of it wasn't. You know, like, again, going back to this, you have things where, let's see, tendrils of slime branch out from Jane's dissolving legs. Okay, that's a cool idea. But then you've got general things like Smitty opens fire and becomes a John Woo action hero. And that's kind of general. And I have to come up with, well, what does that exactly mean? How many bits of John Woo action is he going to do? How many action moves can this guy make that we can afford to shoot in however many days? And we haven't necessarily talked about how many days, but I tell you, I'm not going to have 40 days, and it'd probably be more like 5. And I need to make it practical. So what happens is I take this script and I begin this translation process. I do this regardless of whether it's an effects movie. I start the storyboarding process. And what I'll show you here are my own storyboards for this final sequence, because we can't really cover the whole movie, but I definitely want to show you sort of the finale, sort of the Death Star battle with the Blob. And you know, you'll notice with storyboards that they're very crude, but they definitely show you what the composition is. They show me what's in my head, and ultimately I could show my effects team what's in my head so they can begin to discover how they're going to execute it, or with my help, how to execute it. So you'll see these series of images where Smitty, who's the janitor, comes in, and the Blob is dragging Jane, who is the young scientist that Jana described, who's made a couple of immoral choices with regard to this weaponized mold and ends up paying for her sins by getting sucked up into the ceiling. So Smitty runs in and tries to grab her legs, but the blob, which operates in the ducts and sort of the air conditioning ducts, ceiling ducts, is pulling her up. And he's dodging a slime tendril that's coming at him because this blob is like an octopus and it's shooting tendrils of slime. And he's tugging on the legs. He's fighting to pull her down and finally yanks her down. And then he reacts in an extreme close-up with shock that she's actually been cut in two and her legs are severed and the blob is basically dissolved the upper half of her body. And now this blob begins to move with a life of its own, dragging her severed legs with it. And as we kind of tilt up, we see that this bit of slime is joining with a bigger piece of slime. And I'm saying here, it connects to slime feet. And then all of a sudden we reveal it's this hominid slime monster. And this was sort of the next step in the evolution of this thing. What was once just a slimy blob has now taken on character. It's now a final humanoid thing-like creature that sort of has the original blob elements, but is also humanoid shape because it's absorbing human beings. And in my own mind, in my own crazy director's mind, I kept thinking, maybe this thing, almost like Pinocchio, wants to be a real boy. Maybe if it absorbs enough human beings, it will become human. So now Smitty is squaring off, and I write here speed dolly into Smitty reacting, and he's got this spray gun of disinfectant, which seems to be the only thing that this slime reacts to. And I have this sort of Western composition where his hand is over the spray bottle like a 6-shooter and the monster is behind him. And he draws, and this is where it goes into this John Woo action stuff. He draws his spray bottle and he's advancing, spraying the creature, and the creature withdraws. And then Smitty ducks, avoiding a tendril that's snapping over his head, but then it grabs his leg and it pulls him down and it starts to drag him through frame. And it's pulling him closer and closer. And then he sees this gaping slime mouth that's about to eat him. And he grabs his spray bottle and starts to shake it up, almost like a bottle of Coca-Cola that maybe if he activates it, it's going to be more powerful. And just as he's about to be dragged in, he jams it in its mouth. The creature starts to react wildly, flailing and spewing foam, drops Smitty back, and he crawls away just as the creature's head blows apart and sort of melts back into the slime that it once was and turns into a puddle, and he turns away, and that's effectively the end of the movie. This is in the script, but it's not written shot by shot. There are a lot of great ideas that Mike has in there. Again, some are too expensive. So what I did was I went through the script and I sort of cherry-picked the essence of what he had written and tried to boil it down into a sequence that would convey the spirit of what he had written. And that's, when you're making a low budget movie, and this is definitely a low budget film, what you're trying to do is paint in broad strokes. You want to get the scope and the excitement, but you don't have 10 million shots because you don't have the time. So you have to kind of think very clearly. Somebody had written in the chat that editing is super important. I'm the first person to agree. I think that the best directors have a real strong understanding of editing because everything that you do in terms of shooting is ultimately going to land in this final stage called editing. And so if you just shoot a bunch of stuff without any, particularly with action, if you just shoot a bunch of shots, but you don't really have a sense of how one shot is going to join with the next shot, then you're sort of working with a blindfold. You're sort of hoping that it's going to cut together instead of understanding that, yeah, you can plan, you can shoot to edit. And with action, that's sort of my philosophy, and that's the way to get it done. So I delivered these boards to the special effects people at the animation school, and they were like, great, we know exactly what you want, and we know exactly what we need to do. And we started to have a series of meetings on how to do it. But my drawings are still pretty vague. They get to it, but I wanted them to see what was in my mind beyond the storyboards. So we started sharing images like the ones that I started to show you, right? So there were those images, but then there were other things that I pulled that were from various sources that started to speak to this final monster, that it would have these sort of tentacles, that it would have this sort of muscle tone, and that it could be more than just a bowl of Jello. And I started to pull from all different kinds of resources about what this thing could be. And this led to concept designs being executed by the effects department. Here's another image from the thing. We kept talking about John Carpenter's The Thing as a reference point, and I really wanted that disgusting, sinewy quality, right? So based on these inspirations, the effects team, again, we've been meeting for months here, started to put together sort of mood boards based on some of the things that I had submitted. These were some of the images, again, some of the images that I showed you. Here's one you've seen, here's one you've seen, here are some others that were collected. And all of a sudden, concepts for perhaps what the final monster could be based on my storyboards and these images started to manifest. And some were, more specific than others. Some were closer than others. I would give my notes and say, how about this? Sometimes they would present something and I would doctor it up. So they would present something like this that didn't have these arms. And then I would go into Photoshop and add these extra tendrils because I wanted these arms, because I wanted to be personified and so forth. And this started to take shape. And it's been going this way for the last couple of months. And one of the last stages so far was the animatic, which is essentially what it sounds like, which is a roughly animated version of the storyboards. And generally for a normal movie, you don't need to do animatics, though a lot of directors rely on them on big budget movies. You have David Fincher doing animatics for The Social Network. The whole movie is an animatic. Basically, it's an animated version, so you know every angle, every lens, every camera move before you shoot a frame, and it can be a really good insurance policy. You definitely need it for an effects movie. So the animatics were created for this final sequence. And so what you see here now is the result of Max Fong taking my storyboards and doing an animated version of it. And the reason they wanted it animated is so that they could figure out the timing of the effect shots. For them, every frame costs money. So to know exactly how long each of these shots was going to take on screen, an animatic was necessary. So I think you'll notice a comparison or a strong resemblance to the storyboards I just showed you. Here's the animatic for this bit. And this is obviously him tugging on her and then realizing that
Jack,
she's been severed.
For this one.
I'm so sorry. Am I not sharing it with you guys?
Not this part.
Oh, well, that's dumb. Then you're just hearing me talking about something you can't even see. That's not very visual at all. I apologize. Now. Can you guys see it now? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. So check it out. So this is the sequence. Her getting sucked up into the ceiling, Smitty tugging on her legs, dodging a tendril, trying to pull her out of the slime, realizing with horror that she's been severed, and now the slime starts to move of its own accord and joins with the humanoid monster. And this is the first time we reveal this creature. This is the gunslinger shot over his spray bottle. He pulls and sprays, dodging the tentacles, grabbing his leg, pulling him forward, seeing the gaping, chomping jaws of the slime monster, shaking up the spray bottle and jamming it in its mouth just at the last second, causing the thing to spew foam, drop him, and ultimately blow apart. So, the process is what it is. And it's no different from any of the films I've done professionally. It doesn't matter that we're doing it here at the school. If we go back towards that I showed you initially and sort of side by side, at least for the beginning, you can see that these animatics, you know, didn't come from nowhere. Hang on a second. Right? So this translates into this, and as we roll, and you start to see that it's all so you get the idea, right? That it's a necessary sort of step-by-step process. And now we're into, now we're into the modeling of the creature itself, which is something. I had a meeting today with the effects guys, and Diana, who is creating the final monster. We had. Let me see if I can pull this up. So this is what we ultimately ended up with for the final creature in terms of texture. And, it started to take on this kind of fleshier sort of quality. And this is what we all agreed. And now it's starting to go through the actual modeling process. And even though this is in its infancy right now, this is the three-dimensional thing taking shape. And there are many more tweaks, and obviously it has none of the texture and so forth, but it has to be created in the computer so that it can be animated. And again, this will just be for the final creature. So, with any movie, I think it's important that directors are, you can see I get kind of hyped about this. And I think it's necessary to be a geek and excited about what you're going to make, because it takes a long time, and you really want to be about seeing this thing come to life. And I don't think directing is something that you approach from a sort of distance and with a sort of remove. I think you need to be in it. I always say that, I liken filmmaking to like when you're a little kid playing with dolls or playing with cars. You're like so in it. You're not aware of yourself playing. You're in that world that you've created. And that's sort of the best head to be in when you're making a film, not just in the pre-production phase where we're in now, but in the production phase, all the way through to when you're scoring the film and mixing and adding sound effects to the final color correction. You want to be all about birthing this thing. So, I'm looking forward to shooting this movie. It's, with every day, it gets more and more real. And so that's what we're doing. That's the stuff on the walls. And that's, that'll be my next film.
So the great thing about AAU is that we collaborate with all the departments. So our special effects department is amazing. They do professional films, and it's for our students in the special effects department. A film like this that we can take around the world and show people is a calling card that's guaranteed. Not guaranteed employment, but pretty much. Now, on the other hand, we're incredibly lucky because the people in our special effects department are talented, committed, passionate students. And what would you say, Jack, when we're all done, it would be like, what, 50, 60, 80, how much would you pay for this in the real world? Do you roughly?
What do you mean? You mean the
Effect.
budget?
The
Oh, the
effect.
effects. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, for this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. And our students are doing this amazing work and they collaborate. And that's the other thing about working here. We're studying here. We have an amazing animation department. We have an incredible music department. We have all the departments. If you're a filmmaker and you have a vision that can collaborate with us and make these things come true. And when we shoot this movie, students will be on the crew. Now, will they all be keys? Will they all be the department heads? Probably not, because remember when I said a special effects cinematographer needs to have been a special, but we already have identified our first assistant director, and she's a student. She did the web series. Jack and I were the web series teachers. Jack was blown away by how she did her job, and we asked her to be his AD. Now, Jack works with professional ADs all the time, but we asked, her name is Arnell. And now Arnell is ADing for professional director. So how will that look on a resume? So it's this synergistic, collaborative thing where we all work together and we all trust each other. And I've got to say, the really big, important thing for me is to have fun. And the reason I wanted Jack to do this movie is because Jack loves this. Jack loves this. And I think the job of a producer is to get the director everything you conceivably can. And you don't want to do that for somebody who doesn't love what they're doing. And so for me, I love solving problems. That turns me on. I love solving problems every day, all day. And Jack loves creating problems. That's what every director does. You can never give them enough. You can never find enough money. And that's a great team if you're committed to a film together. And it doesn't matter what the film's about. It just matters that you're committed to that story. Yeah. And we're lucky here that AAU gives us the resources to make that happen. So Hector, we're going to turn this over to you for any kind of questions if people have them.
All right. Well, hey, students. So in the chat, if there's anything you'd like to ask either Jana or Jack right now, let's go ahead and put it in the chat. We'd love to see some of your questions out there. Anything about the film industry, producing, directing, anything we can ask in the chat there? All right. Thank you, Angela. Any questions out there?
Yeah, there were tons of really good questions that were during the time we were speaking. And
you want to scroll back?
Yeah, I mean, some people had actually
get to work on set or have a say of what happens. No.
Well, it depends on the movie. It depends. In general, yes. I mean, in general, no. It's funny because I think in the lower budget world, when you're working, very independently, there's more respect and more of a collaboration. At least I found on some of my films. I don't mind the writer, and I welcome it. But in Hollywood, yes, the writer is generally locked away in a closet and never allowed to see anything.
And I am a writer still, and nobody cares by the time they're shooting. So do we provide job placement? You can't really do job placement in the entertainment business, but what you can do is networking and connections. So a very good example of this is that there was a student producer who I thought was quite exceptional. And we have something called the Spring Show, where we bring up in non-COVID, and we do it virtually in COVID, very recognized industry professionals. And I introduced this student to the showrunner of a popular network show, it doesn't matter what show. And she said, would you like to be my assistant? And that was from the conversation I introduced her to. And she went down to LA and she worked with this woman for the entire summer as her assistant, just from our connection. We have an actress right now who was directed by one of the directors we brought up, who works with one of the top casting directors in Hollywood on a regular basis, and showed her the student's reel. And now the casting director is looking out for jobs for her. I had a directing student like 4 or 5 years ago who I kept saying, you know, you really should be an agent. There's just something about you. You should be an agent. You should be an agent. And I helped her get her first job as an agent's assistant. And now she's a pretty highly ranked person in a production company. And there's story after story after story like this. So what we do is we connect, we introduce. We help you plan. There's one of the directors of the schools of entertainment, a guy named Randy Levinson, who was head of television at Universal TV, and he was a producer. Randy runs our sort of placement resume internship program, and he gets to know you. And then he helps you figure out where to go. For instance, right at this very moment, we have a student, Terrence, whose last name I don't remember, who's interning on the John Colbert Show. And that's because he said he wanted to do it. And there was an application process, and Randy worked and worked and worked with him. Now, his story was good. What he had to say was good. But Randy helped him. And there are very few people they were taking because it's virtual and other things. And right now, he's on that show. So we are able to help people figure out what they want, where they want to go, and help you connect with people in the business to go there.
There was a couple of earlier ones here I could answer. There was one about, someone mentioned, I think Mason mentioned, would stop motion be a possibility? Because stop motion animation he says would have a lot lower of a budget. It depends. I mean, I'm actually a huge fan of stop motion animation, particularly Ray Harryhausen, Jason the Argonauts, the Sinbad movies, Clash of the Titans, the original one. And I actually did a stop motion animated monster film for MTV called Monster Island in the early 2000s. It's a difficult thing right now because it is very expensive. It's actually more, in many ways, more time consuming and more expensive because in a way it's more of an anachronistic special effects technique. Not many people do it anymore. So CGI, regardless of whether you prefer it or not, is more doable on a lower budget now than stop motion. Although I do love it, and it would be a preference if it was possible. And then Adam has asked, any pro tips on choosing shots to convene or convey intentional emotions? Well, you know, that's a really big question. There's a whole class I teach called visual storytelling, which is all about compositions, camera movements, focal lengths, all the technical things that you do in creating a shot in service of an emotional goal. And that's a huge question, but if you know, in the school, that's something that I really do focus on. It's not just about get a close-up. It's, well, what does a close-up do? It's not just about learning how to dolly the camera. It's like, well, what does dollying the camera at a particular speed do for a performance? Can it change a performance? Absolutely. Can it change the feeling? We always talk about, like, how do you illustrate subtext in a shot? How do you illustrate theme? A lot of these things have to do with how you compose that shot, how you move that camera. So it's a huge question, and definitely something we cover here.
If you are asking if you want to direct or be a cinematographer, which track would you recommend? If you're an undergrad, you're going to take a whole lot of classes and see what really calls to you. If you're a grad, you're still going to take a fair number of classes. But the answer is a couple of things. One, we have so many electives that you can pick one, take electives in another, and learn both. I think the deeper and more professional answer to that is they're very different human beings. A director, literally, you have to be able to get people to want to follow you through a fire. You just walk towards the fire, and a lot of people go behind you, and you just keep going, hey, we're walking through the fire, and everybody just keeps on walking through the fire. So a director takes a certain level of command as a person, a certain energy as a person. A cinematographer can be more internal. A cinematographer still might command a crew of 10 people, but they're not commanding a crew of 80 people. They're just very, very different personalities, and they're interested fundamentally in different things. So a director is interested in it all, but a cinematographer is interested in a particular. So you can play around between the departments and see what you're more drawn to, but also a lot of it has to do with who you are.
Yeah. Isabella asked, said, for directors, is there any advice for keeping up motivation when shooting a film that you know the budget is really small and has lots of limits on creative freedom? Since a lot of beginner filmmakers usually envision Steven Spielberg level productions. Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. And I think it's one that I deal with every time I go out and make a movie. I think it starts with the fact that particularly when you're starting out and after you get through school and after you go through all this, your first film, and generally that's going to be a film that you independently finance or find a way to doing for a very small budget. You need to pick something that is personally necessary, meaning that it's in your mind, it's like you can't live unless you make this thing. It can't be something that you have a passing interest. You have to be you have to be on a crusade, like nobody just like decides, yeah, I'm going to have a baby. No, you're going to have a baby. So that in many ways helps you overcome all the obstacles which every producer and director faces on any movie, regardless of budget. And you're going to come out of days where you're like, oh my God, this sucks and I suck. But if the idea of it is that big in your mind and you can hold on to that vision of this has to be done, you will get through it. I always try to get at least one shot in a day that I can go home and go, yeah, that was good. So now I want to wake up in the morning and go to work. If it's, it's very hard to recover from a total disaster where nothing works out. But I think the other thing is to not mount a movie that can't be made for a little bit of money.
But
you know
also,
what I mean?
I'm going to interject because I made a lot of movies for a little bit of money. I was lucky enough to make a couple studio movies and a couple of $5-6 million movies. But most of the movies I made were $1, $2, $3 million. And you know what? It's a lot of fun. Not necessarily when you're doing it, but we had blimps lighting things. When you have little, you do beg, borrow, and steal. I think it's when you're in the middle that it's difficult. Because when you're in the middle, you can't say, I have no money and get something for free. But when you have little money, you literally are almost Steven Spielberg in some ways. And Jack's right. It is that one thing. I have made such nightmare movies that people, and including a monster movie, that people think I should write books about the experience. But it is that one thing in a day. And the other thing it's the people you're working with. Because if you can laugh at the monsters that just fell apart on the set right before you were going to shoot, if you can laugh with the people you're working with and cry with the people you're working with and even shout with the people you're working with, it makes it worth getting up and going to work because you're all making the same movie. Yeah. And that goes back to the personality of the director, because you got to be making the director's movie. It's all about the director and how much people want to show up for that person.
Yeah, it is contagious. It's like if you're a director that is, it's like it's the only good kind of contagious thing there is when you're so excited as a filmmaker that spreads to everybody. And nobody cares more about making the movie than the director and the producer. Everybody else is working. They enjoy their jobs, but they're not going to die for your movie. So it's very important that that your spirit of like, this is going to be great, transmits to everybody so that they kind of get the notion that this is not just another day at the office. This actually could be something. And that's how you get the best out of your crew. That's what it means to be a leader. And that's a big part of being a director. You know, you have to lead these people. And, you know, like I said, I don't fake it. I am a geek about this stuff and have been since I was making Super 8 movies as a 10-year-old. So it's not about looking cool on set. It's about letting myself just be a nerd and go for it. And hopefully that gets people on board, you know?
So how did you start to pursue this craft? I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. I found a paper I wrote when I was 16 years old that says I want to be an entertainment lawyer so that I can be a big movie producer, because I didn't know anybody in the film business. I don't think there was a day between the time I was 8 years old and basically now when I don't watch a movie or TV show or several. I read hundreds of books and magazines. I just love consuming the visual image in any way it comes out. And when I realized that law school was a misguided adventure I'd undertaken, even though I graduated, I got a job in an agency. And then I realized, oh, that's sort of like being a lawyer. So then I got a job working in a production company. And I just kept working my way up. And so much of what I got was luck, but the luck had to do with timing and had to do with the people I knew. And so the one thing, and we teach this intensively here, is networking. It's getting to know people at your level who know people at your level who help you, who say, hey, do you want to do this? It's these little indie films that Jack's talking about, where people work together on it. You know, Reservoir Dogs, that was just a bunch of friends. That was totally just a bunch of friends. You know, Black Panther, the composer, when he won his Oscar, said, Ryan, remember when we were in your dorm room fantasizing about this 11 years ago? Just a bunch of friends. So it's just persistence and luck.
Yeah.
Jack, about you?
Well, I was, you know, I was the same way. I loved films, and my father was a big movie geek, so he showed me a lot of films starting when I was very young, and I got taken with it and wanted to know how they were made, and started fooling around with the family home movie camera, which in those days was a Super 8 movie camera, making little monster movies and stuff. But ultimately, I went to film school. I realized that if I wanted to be a professional, I needed to learn more. I needed to know how it was done professionally. So I went to film school, and then I went to NYU and I graduated, and then I moved to Hollywood, and just like everybody who finishes film school. And then it just became like what Jana was saying, it became about meeting as many people as possible and ultimately forming like a small group of people. Some were producers, some were writers, some were directors, and editors, and they were all just like me, young, starting out, you know, trying to figure it out. And little by little, we started to work together on small things, and I started making behind the scenes documentaries. Those were the first jobs I could get as a director. They were small, they paid a little bit of money, but I spent a lot of time on sets watching big directors work and learning more about how professionals did it. You know, it was kind of a compliment to film school, and ultimately scrapped together on credit cards enough money to do a low budget feature. And that sort of differentiated me from everybody else who was talking about making a feature. Suddenly I had done something, they were looking at me like, oh, well, maybe he can be hired as a director. He has done a 90-minute movie. He has won a few awards at festivals. And that led me to some of my first professional directing gigs. But basically my whole career has been sort of bouncing back and forth between jobs for hire, which are slightly bigger movies, you know, usually with the studios or the networks, and also smaller independent movies, because I find, as Jana was saying earlier, that the lower budget movies, even though you have loads of problems, has way less creative interference. And that's something I've always cherished. I often say I'll take less money and more creative control if it really comes down to it, because, I want to make the movie that I see. But that's just me. Other people are like, nah, I'll just take the money. It depends on.
To Ian's question, believe it or not, when I'm not teaching, I'm pretty shy. I'm the person holding the wall up at the party. Networking is other people standing next to the wall. Like Jack said, he got a lot of friends. I mean, when I was first an agent, 5 guys and me, I was the girl. Yeah, we'd hung out and we just hung out. But then one of the guys became a big agent. That same guy became a vice president at Disney Studios. Another one of the guys, he became a vice president at Columbia Studios. We all grew together, but it wasn't like we ran out and networked with famous people. We hung out with our pals. And, the best way to get a job in Hollywood is play basketball at the Hollywood Y and be really, really, really good. Teach tennis, go whitewater rafting. Networking is finding people with a like passion. So the honest to God truth, and I don't know if you guys can tell from this, is as geeked out as Jack is about directing. I'm 65 and I'm going on a set on Friday, which, I'm in the prime COVID, whatever, because I can't live without producing. Okay. I love production. I could not fathom not shooting. And that's the bottom line to every question here. I've gone a year with 3 kids without earning a penny because there was this movie I wanted to make and I was spending all my time trying to get this movie to make as my bank account is going down and down and down because I had to get that movie made. Okay. That's what, if you really believe in yourself, you really want to be in this business, you will be. Now, will you be a superstar? Luck and timing. But will you be in this business? Absolutely, yes. So for those of you who say, can anybody volunteer? Yes, we'll take any breathing body when we're shooting on site, because there's always something you can learn. I learned from Jack. Jack is like, I sometimes joke with Jack, I'm going to the Jack Perez School of Directing because once in a while I do that too. And I'm always coming to Jack and showing him my storyboards and asking him about lens. I'm still learning every day. I'm writing a script. Actually, I was writing right before this. And I teach 5 writing classes, and stuff from my lectures as I'm typing are going in. No, you can't use the word and. Do separate sentences. Okay. So we're all of us learning, but we all have this passion. And that's, if you have the passion, you will get somewhere. I can't tell you where you'll get, but you'll get somewhere. Jack,
I agree.
You want to?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't, no, I just think that's probably I know a lot of you are like, if I don't know what I'm going to do exactly, where do I start? And I think, like, again, what Jana was saying, in our school, you get a chance to sort of dabble in everything. It's like, it's like committing to a major. You don't have to commit to the directing track right away or the cinematography track. You can, or the editing track. You can do it all and find what really is comfortable for you. And so you're not in a rush to say, this is what I am and this is what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And I think it's a good thing because, until you really do it, it is hard work. I mean, it's not when you love it, but it is hard work. And I think that's one of the things that you can find in film school. You're like, this I have a feel for, and I love this. And so this area is what I should pursue. The things that feel like homework that are not like, that shouldn't be, then that's a good tip that's not your thing. You know what I mean? So you'll be able to discover, what your major or your focus is while you're in film school. And sometimes it continues outside of, professionally. Something like, a writer like Jana will ultimately direct, many times editors or actors move into directing after focusing on one particular area. So it can be an evolving thing. You don't have to commit and say, I'm this and nothing else, you know?
Well, let's talk about writer-directors because a number of you have asked. Okay, writing's a job. Everybody thinks they can do it because we all write our name. We've been doing it since we've been 5 years old. But writing's a job and directing is a job. And they are not the same job. There are very few good writer-directors because you're seeing and hearing differently. Are there good ones? There are phenomenal, Francis Ford Coppola, you know, there are phenomenal writer-directors, but there are very few good ones because they're two separate jobs. And generally, a person is better at one than the other. Generally, when you see a writer become a director, it's because they're going to protect their work against all those directors who take their work and screw it up. And generally, they'll direct one film and then they'll, nah, not doing that again. But yes, you can be a writer-director. There are writer-directors, but very few who are really good. Just realize one thing. In a real shooting world, you shoot a minimum of 12.5-hour days, which means that's when the clock starts. It's not when you're driving to the place. It's not when you're driving home from the place. And that's a minimum. When I'm shooting $1 million movie, and I'm not doing it at school, but in the real world, I'm shooting 14 to 18-hour days. And that's not driving to the place or driving home from the place. So when Jack says this is hard work, those black tie dinners and all that stuff and the Oscar, that's not the work. The work is 60 12.5-hour days. Or if Jack's movie was in the real world, it might be 100 12.5-hour days. And it's day in and day out and day in and day out. And you don't get to go home and say, well, not coming in tomorrow, because everybody relies on you. And if the location's 50 minutes from your house, it's 12.5 hours. Plus, when you're done wrapping, you stay a little longer to finish wrapping. And then you still have to drive home and you still have to get up for the next day.
Yeah.
So a lot of writers, they're not 12.5-hour day kind of people. A lot of directors are. So again, who are you? What floats your boat creatively? So that's the writer-director answer. Anybody else?
Somebody writes, I think maybe one of the last things here is, what are things that film school helped you to understand, establish that you couldn't have understood or established without attending? I think that's a good question. I mean, there were, you can watch movies and sort of figure out, well, it looks like this is how you make a movie. And look, now more than ever, with cameras, phones being what they are, and desktop editing software being what it is, and with apps up the wazoo, you can make something look kind of and smell like a movie. But the truth is that, storytelling and understanding really what makes a movie, like everybody who gets into this has been moved tremendously by something they've seen, a film, a television show, something that's changed their life. Those things don't happen by accident. There is a craft. There are various philosophies that you can only get if you interface with people who have done it. And I don't think it's something that can be absorbed through osmosis. Just being able to watch a movie doesn't necessarily teach you how to make a movie. And in film school, for me, it was those few teachers that opened my eyes to, this is my philosophy on how to shoot something, or this is my philosophy on how to edit something. It wasn't just the technical things like learning what an f-stop is and what a dolly is. It was like, these are the why you make these technical choices. And that was like those, I still, like, even when I make a movie now, I will contact my professor from film school and go, do you want to look at my movie? Because he's still so important to me in terms of what that information that he gave me. So I think that's the difference. can you get away with it? Yeah, but I think there are keys, there's key information that can probably only be communicated by those who teach, who have been there. You know?
It's also about talking to actors. They're learning how to talk to an actor. It takes years
Yeah.
to get what you want, and we give you the tools for that. This semester, we've started putting our directors in the budgeting and scheduling class, and there was some grumblings, and I'm already getting thank yous because they're armed with a weapon. If they know how to do it, they know how to argue it. So these are all things, the know how to do it, and then the practicing it over.
Yeah.
When you're a PA on a set, you're getting coffee. You're on the run to pick up my laundry. You are not practicing it. At our school, you are going to shoot every week. You're going to shoot, and you're going to have people looking at what you shoot.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that's such a great point, and I realized that later in film school that because of these assignments, because of these weekly, sometimes daily assignments, you become fluent in the language of filmmaking. And that's really what it is. It is a language. It's not, you'll hear these classes, the language of film. It's true. It's absolutely a language. And some of you speak more than one language. And you know that when you try to learn a language, in the beginning, you're just struggling to be understood. It's like that with any language, whether it's music or film. The fact that you keep doing it or just keep speaking it, you'll know that the more you speak a new language, the more fluent you become. That's a huge thing. So the structure of school provides that atmosphere where you can keep doing it, as Jana said, over and over and over again. The difference between my films as a freshman, which were like atrocious, and just 2 years later, I was like, I don't think I would have made that movement if I didn't have the frequency of assignments, the input from my professors, and the constant refining of what I was doing, so that by the time after 4 years, I was like, it was night and day. It was absolutely night and day. One was just a kid screwing around like I was when I was in high school. One was like somebody who was now geared to being a professional, and that was the difference. You're being groomed to be a professional.
In my writing for Shot in a Day class on Monday, I did a lecture on dialogue, and then 11 students read their scripts out loud for everybody. We had people actually playing the roles. And 3 of the students came to me and said, "Oh my God, from your lecture, and then I'm hearing, and I realized I was doing this and that and this and that. Now I'm going to do a rewrite for class next week. And I understand the concept, and it's could you maybe in your gut internalize that at some level, maybe, but never the way you can when it's taught and practiced. And that's why we're not only a lecture-based school. If we were a lecture-based school, no, but it's the doing of what you're learning. That's the important thing about this place.
Absolutely. So I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
So I'm just going to put my email. In the chat, and also we are now Discorded up the wazoo, so I can also be reached on Discord. So that's the other place you can find me. I respond really, really quickly. So if anybody has any questions, either find me in Discord or find me at this email.
Yeah, and Discord for me too. And also, if you can also Facebook me too. You'll recognize me, I'm sure.
And you'll see lots of Halloween stuff. Lots and lots and lots of Halloween stuff.
Right. If you need any Halloween movie recommendations, don't be afraid to ask. So cool. Very cool. This was fun.
Hector, over to you.
All right. Well, hey, thank you very much. So students, if you're out there in the chat, if you want to say a a big thank you to Jack, a big thank you to Jana tonight. I'm sure that they'll be more than appreciative, but we love having you all here. We're so thankful for your time, and we hope that today was helpful. One of the things I just want to make sure that I really beg each and every one of you is, if you're thinking about trying to get into this industry, if you're considering school, send me an email if you want to talk. Really my goal is really just to try to sit down and help you break down what your options would be. Not necessarily talk you into it, but if you're thinking about going to school, whether you're thinking about, hey, I already have a degree in something and a background and I want to get a master's in this. Some people have experience, some people have no experience. We literally have a home for everybody. So I would just encourage you to start off with a conversation so we can sit down and try to help you figure out what it is that you want to do and what would make the most sense for you. So I know somebody out there was saying, I'm thinking about being a transfer student. That's great. We can try to build a path out for you. If there's anybody out here that's looking at trying to join the university for an undergraduate or graduate degree, whether you're a domestic or international student, that's the link you can check out, or you can send me an email. If anybody out there is currently in high school, if you are in high school, so in the chat, anybody here in high school, I'm putting a link there for all of our high school students. If you are in high school, 9th grade through 12th grade, as long as you're in high school, we have a program where you can take free classes. And they're really just a good way to explore film. It's a great way to explore and just get your feet wet. So these courses are free. You don't have to pay for them. And then also, more importantly, when you do take the courses, if you choose to join the academy in the future, those courses are also basically an opportunity to earn scholarship dollars here at a university. So I'll put that link in there one more time for all my students that are currently in school. But once again, I'm going to throw my email in here. I've actually had a couple people email me already behind the scenes, and I've gotten back to them a few times. But just do me a favor, send me an email. Please don't be shy. I'd love to connect with you and try to set up a time to talk. Film program, try to help you to figure out what your next steps are. So I have a wonderful team here that can connect with you. And more importantly, too, I can always connect you over to Jana, to somebody like Jack. I know that they love to look at student work, any portfolio work you have. But if you don't have any work at all and you've never even gotten started, don't even worry about it. It's okay. That's what our school's here for, to try to help you. So,
Justine, no, you don't have to be local. We have both virtual and online high school classes.
Yeah, so you don't have to be local to be a student here. Obviously, in COVID, we've taken the precautions to make sure that everybody can be safe from home. But if you want to move to the campus in the future, you always have that opportunity as well. But if you want to be an online student, we offer everything online as well. So definitely do not have to be here in person. And the pre-college courses are all offered online as well. So without further ado, thank you so much to our team, everybody behind the scenes. I want to give a shout out to the marketing team out there. I know Wakana, William, the great John Beeson, everybody putting this stuff on behind the scenes. Thank you to the online education team for helping us to do all the streaming and YouTube. Thank you to Mr. Jack Perez and Miss Jana Memel for putting this on tonight. So thank you all so much for being here. I wish you all a safe night. I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording, and I'll stay back in the chat to drop some additional